The sterile, bright lights flickered above as Elon Musk sat motionless in the cold, sterile hospital room. His breath was shallow, and the room felt eerily silent, except for the occasional beeping of machines monitoring his vitals. He wasn't used to feeling this vulnerable. Elon Musk, the man who had revolutionized space travel, electric cars, and countless other industries, now found himself face to face with a threat he couldn't outsmart. "Mr. Musk, we're going to run a few more tests," a nurse said quietly, her voice as calm as she could make it, but her eyes couldn't hide the concern. He could tell something wasn't right. Elon glanced at the clock. It had been hours since he'd been rushed in, and he still didn't know exactly what was going on with him. The doctors had given him no clear answers, only questions and more tests. He hated uncertainty, and this felt like a storm he couldn't see coming, a storm he couldn't control. A wave of discomfort washed over him. His mind flashed to the most important questions that had always driven him. How much longer would he have? What if this was it? What if this was the end of everything? The thought made his chest tighten. He had always prided himself on being able to control every situation, to solve any problem with science, technology, and sheer willpower. But now, lying in that hospital bed, surrounded by machines he couldn't fix, he realized just how fragile everything truly was. Elon had always believed in the power of human ingenuity, the brilliance of technology to overcome any obstacle. But lying here, fighting for breath, he couldn't help but wonder, was there something more to this life? Something beyond the algorithms, beyond the machines, beyond the world he had so meticulously crafted? He'd always kept his faith at arm's length. It wasn't that he was an atheist necessarily. He just saw things differently. He trusted in what he could see, what could be measured and proven. But now, faced with the unknown, he couldn't help but feel small. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The nurse left the room, but Elon's mind kept racing. He thought about his companies, his family, the endless projects he'd been managing. His companies had become his life, his identity. But in that moment, all of it seemed irrelevant. As the hours passed, the sense of unease grew. A sudden wave of panic set in. Was he going to make it through this? Was he going to die before finishing all the things he set out to do? And yet, something unexpected began to stir inside him, a question he had never seriously considered before. Was there more to life than just success and achievement? What if there was something beyond all of this, something more meaningful than technology or business? In the quiet stillness of that hospital room, Elon found himself wondering, could there be more to this than the pursuit of progress? That night, as sleep finally overtook him, he was haunted by a question that would change everything. What if faith, not technology, was the key to everything he'd been searching for? Elon Musk had always believed in the power of the mind. From a young age, his brilliance was evident. Growing up in Pretoria, South Africa, he was a quiet, introspective child, someone who preferred the company of books to playground games. By the time he was 12, he had already taught himself computer programming and created his first video game blaster. But despite his prodigious intellect, he never quite fit in. His father, Elon Musk, had been a complicated figure in his life, distant, critical, and often emotionally unavailable. Elon recalled many nights in his youth, sitting alone in his room, poring over books or staring up at the stars. It was there, in the quiet of those lonely nights, that he first dreamed of reaching beyond the Earth's atmosphere. But Elon's relationship with his father was strained. Errol's constant critiques and lack of emotional warmth only made Elon more determined to prove himself, to show the world that he was capable of far more than anyone had ever imagined. It wasn't just his father who challenged him. At school, Elon was often bullied for being different. He didn't care for the sports most kids played, nor did he fit in with the other students. His mind was always elsewhere, on the future, on space, on technology. His world was one of ideas, not of conformity. Yet despite the challenges, there was one thing Elon could always rely on: his desire to succeed, to make an impact. His passion for innovation burned brightly inside him. In fact, It was that passion that had propelled him to leave South Africa for Canada and eventually to the United States, where he would eventually build the companies that would change the world. The story of his rise to fame was one of relentless ambition. After co-founding Zip2, he sold it to Compaq for $307 million, which he then used to fund his next ventures, X.com, which would later become PayPal, and eventually SpaceX and Tesla. Through each company, Elon learned the art of resilience, of navigating failure and disappointment while relentlessly pursuing his vision. But even with his enormous wealth and success, there remained a gnawing emptiness, a void that all the achievements and accolades couldn't fill. At his core, Elon believed that technology had the power to solve humanity's greatest problems, from climate change to the colonization of Mars. But was that enough? Could technology alone provide meaning to life? His success had always been tied to his belief in the practical application of innovation. Technology, science, and logic. These were the pillars of his existence. Faith, to him, was something distant, something that didn't fit into his world of equations and rockets. Yet, as he lay in that hospital room, confronting his mortality for the first time, he began to question everything. Could it be that the very thing he had dismissed, faith, was the one thing he had been missing all along? His thoughts drifted to his mother, May Musk, a strong, independent woman who had always supported him, even when he was a boy dreaming of space travel in his room. She had always been a quiet but firm believer in God, though Elon had never truly understood her faith. He respected her, but he had never seen the need for religion in his own life. Still, his mother's gentle guidance and unwavering belief in the goodness of life had always stuck with him. Perhaps that was the seed of something he'd never fully acknowledged before. Could faith, in some form, hold the key to understanding the larger mysteries of existence? As the hospital room became quieter, Elon felt his mind returning to the idea of faith. There was a restlessness in him, an inner conflict between his scientific mind and the subtle stirrings of something spiritual. Could it be that after all these years, he was finally ready to explore the very thing he had kept at arm's length? The answer wasn't clear, but one thing was certain. The search for meaning, for purpose, would become his new mission. Elon Musk had always considered himself a man of reason. His life was built on the concrete foundations of logic, science, and technology. Religion, to him, was something that belonged to the past, a relic of earlier centuries, irrelevant in a world where human intellect could solve almost any problem. He had always believed that humanity's future lay in innovation and discovery, not in ancient texts or age-old doctrines. But now, lying in that hospital bed, facing the very real possibility of his own mortality, Elon felt something different stirring inside him. The uncertainty of his condition had opened a door, a crack into a world he had long dismissed. What if there was more to life than what could be explained by science? What if the answers to some of his most profound questions didn't lie in technology, but in something more ancient and mysterious? It was during this time of doubt and questioning that he met David, a man who would change the course of his journey in ways he couldn't yet imagine. David was introduced to Elon by a mutual friend, someone who knew that Elon was at a crossroads. David was a pastor, a humble man with a gentle presence, and his calm demeanor immediately set Elon at ease. They met for the first time at a quiet cafe, the kind of place Elon rarely frequented, preferring the busy buzz of high-end restaurants or corporate settings. David wasn't pushy. He didn't bombard Elon with scripture or theological arguments. Instead, he listened. He asked questions about Elon's life, his work, his struggles, and his successes. And as they spoke, David didn't shy away from talking about his own faith, not as a lecture, but as a sharing of his own personal experiences. He spoke of how his faith in Jesus had transformed his life, how it gave him peace even in the midst of hardship. At first, Elon was skeptical. He didn't understand how faith could offer someone peace when science and technology were the tools that brought real solutions to the world's problems. What could a 2,000-year-old story about a carpenter from Nazareth possibly have to do with the challenges he faced? But David didn't push. Instead, he shared his own doubts, how he, too, had struggled with faith at times, but how over the years he had come to realize that faith wasn't about abandoning logic. It was about acknowledging a deeper truth that transcended the material world. It was about love, sacrifice, and a sense of purpose greater than oneself. There was something about David's words that resonated with Elon. He had always been driven by a desire to make the world a better place, to solve problems and push the boundaries of what was possible. But somewhere along the way, he had lost sight of the bigger picture, the question of why he was doing it all in the first place. One evening, after another conversation with David, Elon found himself alone in his office, staring out the window at the night sky. The stars twinkled in the distance, a vast expanse of possibilities. He had spent years dreaming of taking humanity to space, of building rockets that would carry people to Mars. But in that moment, as he gazed up at the universe, he wondered, what if the answers I'm looking for aren't found in rockets or algorithms? What if they're found in something deeper? That night, he pulled a dusty Bible off the shelf, a gift from his mother, he realized. He had never opened it before, but in the stillness of his mind, he felt compelled to read. He started in the Gospels, where the story of Jesus' life and teachings unfolded before him. The words were simple, yet profound. Love your neighbor as yourself. Forgive 77 times. Turn the other cheek. These weren't the teachings of someone trying to sell an idea. These were the words of a man who had truly understood the meaning of love and sacrifice. Elon was taken aback by the humility of it all. Here was a man who, by all accounts, should have been a powerful leader, yet chose a path of service, of selflessness. It was a stark contrast to the tech mogul Elon had become, focused on the future, on progress, on the relentless pursuit of more. And yet, as he read on, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that there was something profound in these words, something that reached beyond the confines of any technology or business strategy he had ever known. The next morning, he called David and asked to meet again. There was still so much he didn't understand, so many questions he needed answers to. But for the first time, he felt a spark of hope, a hope that maybe, just maybe, there was something greater than his empire of technology and innovation. David welcomed him with warmth and patience, knowing that the journey ahead would not be quick or easy. But for the first time in a long time, Elon felt like he was on the verge of discovering something far more important than any scientific breakthrough. As the days passed, Elon's mind became consumed with an internal battle he hadn't anticipated. On the surface, everything in his life seemed perfect. His companies were thriving, he was pushing the boundaries of space exploration, and he was at the forefront of the technological revolution. Yet, as he dug deeper into his newfound exploration of faith, a storm brewed within him, a conflict between the world he had built and the teachings he had begun to absorb. David continued to meet with Elon, providing gentle guidance, but it was clear to both of them that Elon's journey would not be a simple one. Every conversation sparked new questions. Was it possible to reconcile the mind of a scientist with the heart of someone who had faith in a higher power? Could he, a man who had spent decades pushing humanity's limits through technology, embrace something as intangible as faith? In the quiet moments, when Elon wasn't speaking with David or reading scripture, he began to feel a deep tension. The logical part of his mind tried to dismiss the pull he felt towards the idea of a higher purpose. It was hard to imagine that the answers to the universe weren't found in equations, rockets, or algorithms. He'd spent his entire life working tirelessly to build and innovate, believing that if humanity could just keep advancing, everything would fall into place. But now, as he stared at the ceiling of his office late at night, that feeling of emptiness returned. The one that had been gnawing at him before his health crisis, the one that had triggered this whole spiritual awakening. It was an ache, a longing for something he couldn't yet define. The more Elon tried to compartmentalize his thoughts about faith, the more they seeped into his daily life. He couldn't help but notice how people who lived with faith seemed to carry a peace he had never experienced. They didn't operate from a place of fear or constant striving. Instead, they seemed to walk through life with a quiet confidence that came from trusting in something greater than themselves. In one particularly restless moment, Elon went for a walk around the neighborhood, his mind racing. He passed by homes with children playing in their yards, couples walking hand in hand, and people gathered around dinner tables, enjoying simple moments of connection. It hit him in a way it hadn't before. The thing he had been chasing for all these years wasn't just about building rockets or cars. It was about connection, about purpose, about being part of something bigger than himself. As he walked, a memory surfaced. It was a conversation he had had with his mother years ago, back when he was still a teenager. She had spoken of her faith in God, and Elon had dismissed it with his usual skepticism. But now, he couldn't help but wonder if she had been onto something all along. "Faith is what gives life meaning," she had said, her voice calm and sure. "But what about reason?" Elon had asked, his young mind focused on logic and science. "Reason is important," his mother had replied with a smile. "But sometimes, the things that matter most in life can't be measured. They can't be explained by reason alone. Faith gives us hope, and hope is what keeps us moving forward, even when we can't see the way." Her words echoed in his mind now, and he found himself stopping in his tracks, staring at the ground beneath his feet. It wasn't that he hadn't understood her before. It was that he hadn't been ready to hear her. But now, as he stood there on the sidewalk, everything seemed to align in a way he couldn't ignore. It wasn't about abandoning reason or rejecting science. It was about understanding that faith and reason didn't have to be enemies. They could coexist, and perhaps, in the most profound sense, they were meant to. The next day, Elon met with David again, his heart heavy with the weight of everything he had been processing. He knew he had to confront his doubts, his fear of surrendering control, of trusting in something beyond himself. But he also knew that he couldn't ignore the pull he felt towards something deeper, something that wasn't bound by the constraints of time, space, or technology. "I'm struggling," Elon admitted, his voice quieter than usual. "I don't know how to reconcile what I've spent my entire life doing with what I'm beginning to believe. Can they coexist? My mind is telling me one thing, but my heart feels differently." David looked at him with understanding. "It's okay to struggle, Elon. Faith isn't about having all the answers right away. It's about being willing to let go of the need to control everything and trust that there's more to life than what we can see or measure. You don't have to have all the answers now. Just take one step at a time." Elon nodded slowly, feeling a sense of relief. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel the need to have everything figured out. Perhaps that was the first lesson he needed to learn, to trust, even when he couldn't see the full picture. As he left the meeting with David, Elon's thoughts were quieter, more focused. He knew that the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, he felt a sense of peace, a peace that came from knowing that he wasn't alone in this quest for meaning. In the midst of all the chaos, all the unanswered questions, there was something he had overlooked for so long. Something simple, yet powerful. The willingness to believe, even when the answers weren't clear. Days turned into weeks, and the struggle within Elon continued. He had always been a man of action, someone who sought answers through research, trial, and error. But this was different. Faith wasn't something he could calculate, measure, or test in the same way he could with rockets or artificial intelligence. There was no equation for belief, no scientific theory to guide him through the murky waters of spiritual transformation. Still, the more he read and the more time he spent with David, the more he began to sense something powerful awakening inside him. A quiet whisper that grew louder each day. It was as though something deep within him was urging him to take the next step, to embrace the unknown, to trust that there was more to life than what he could see or touch. The future he had spent so many years building suddenly seemed insignificant in the face of something eternal. One evening, after another long day of meetings, Elon found himself alone in his office. The hum of the fluorescent lights above and the constant ticking of the clock on the wall were the only sounds that filled the space. Yet tonight, everything felt different. He wasn't thinking about his next business move, his next technological breakthrough, or even the latest advancements in space travel. Instead, his mind was focused on a single question. What is my purpose? He pulled out his Bible once again, opening it to the Gospel of Matthew. He began to read, slowly at first, savoring each word. And then, as he read the words of Jesus, something remarkable happened. It wasn't just the teachings of love, forgiveness, and sacrifice that began to resonate with him. It was the person of Jesus himself. There was a power in the words, a weight in the promises, and an invitation to something far greater than himself. For the first time, Elon felt a stirring in his heart, a desire not just to understand, but to live out the principles of what he was reading. He wasn't sure how it would look, how it would fit into his life, but he knew that this was a moment of transformation. A shift had occurred. He wasn't just curious about faith anymore. He was beginning to believe. The next day, as he drove to one of his many meetings, Elon found himself thinking about how to integrate this new understanding into his life. It was a daunting thought. His world had always been one of logic and control, but now, the idea of surrendering to something greater felt both terrifying and liberating. He remembered something David had said: "Faith doesn't mean abandoning your mind, Elon. It means expanding it. It's not about denying reason. It's about seeing the bigger picture." Elon had spent so much of his life focused on the tangible, the measurable, the visible. But perhaps there was more to the world than what could be quantified. His car rolled to a stop at a red light, and for a moment, Elon just sat there, staring at the traffic around him. He thought about all the things he had accomplished in his life, the billions he had amassed, the companies he had built, the rockets that had launched into space. But in that moment, he realized none of it would matter if he didn't have peace in his heart. None of it would matter if he didn't find a way to truly live for something greater than himself. With a deep breath, Elon made a decision. It was time to stop running from what he had been feeling for so long. He wasn't sure what it would mean for his companies, his image, or his future, but he knew he couldn't ignore it any longer. That evening, after another conversation with David, Elon made a commitment. He would begin to live his life with faith, not just as an intellectual pursuit, but as a way of life. He would stop compartmentalizing faith and reason, instead allowing them to coexist in a way that brought balance and peace to his soul. It wasn't going to be easy, and he knew there would be challenges ahead, but he was ready to embrace this new path. In the weeks that followed, Elon began to make small but significant changes. He started waking up earlier to spend time in prayer and reflection. He began reading more scripture, not just as an intellectual exercise, but as a way to connect with something deeper. He took time to be more present with his family, to appreciate the simple moments of life that he had often overlooked in the pursuit of success. As he continued on this journey, Elon began to see changes in himself. He was more patient, more compassionate, and more aware of the needs of those around him. His relationships deepened, especially with his children. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of peace that had eluded him for so long. But perhaps the most profound change was in how he viewed his work. Elon had always believed that technology and innovation were the keys to solving the world's greatest problems. He still believed that, but now he saw it through a different lens. Instead of seeing his companies as a means to personal success or glory, he began to see them as tools to make a lasting, positive impact on the world. His ultimate goal wasn't just to reach Mars. It was to create a better world here on Earth, to use his gifts for the greater good. One afternoon, as he sat with David discussing the future, Elon realized something. This wasn't just about religion or science anymore. This was about purpose, and he had finally found his purpose. Not in the success of his businesses, not in the technologies he created, but in the love and faith that drove him to serve others and make the world a better place. For the first time in his life, Elon Musk felt truly free. Free from the burden of needing to be in control of everything. Free from the relentless drive for achievement that had always defined him. And most of all, free to embrace the love and peace that had always been there, waiting for him to discover it. As the days went by, Elon began to feel a deeper shift within himself. One that reached far beyond his personal beliefs and began to influence his work and relationships. His newfound faith wasn't a secret, but it wasn't something he broadcasted either. It was something deeply personal, something that changed the way he saw the world and the way he approached the challenges before him. He could no longer ignore the subtle but powerful force that had begun to steer his decisions. It wasn't just the pursuit of knowledge or the drive for technological dominance that fueled him anymore. Now, he was driven by a purpose that transcended innovation, a desire to make a difference not just in the world of science, but in the hearts and lives of people. David, his spiritual mentor and friend, had watched Elon's transformation with quiet encouragement. He could see that Elon was still grappling with how to integrate his faith with his work, but he was no longer the same man who had walked into that cafe weeks ago. Skeptical, driven only by the need to conquer the next frontier of technology. There was a gentleness to him now, a new awareness of the interconnectedness of all things. One evening, after a particularly insightful conversation, Elon had an epiphany. He realized that all his years of striving, of pushing the boundaries of what was possible, of relentlessly pursuing success, had come at a cost. He had often been so focused on the end goal that he had overlooked the very people who made it all possible. The engineers, the workers, the families, the communities that relied on his companies and the products they created. In that moment, something profound clicked. Elon understood now that true leadership wasn't about domination or being at the top. True leadership was about service. It was about using his influence, his success, and his resources to lift others up, to inspire those around him to be the best versions of themselves, and to ensure that the work he did had a lasting, positive impact on the world. He thought back to the way Jesus had lived, constantly serving others, always putting their needs before his own. It wasn't about wealth or status. It was about making a real difference in people's lives. And this was the kind of leadership that Elon wanted to embody moving forward. But how could he bring this new perspective into the world of high-stakes business, a world driven by competition, profits, and the relentless pursuit of success? Elon wasn't sure, but he knew it was time for a change. The next board meeting he decided, would be different. He would speak to his team not just as a CEO, but as someone who had discovered something bigger than profits and performance metrics. He would speak to them about purpose, about making the world a better place not just with technology, but with love, with compassion, and with a commitment to making sure that their innovations served humanity in the most meaningful ways possible. The meeting was scheduled for the following week, and Elon spent the days leading up to it preparing. He thought about how best to frame this shift in his thinking, how to convey his vision for the future, not just of SpaceX or Tesla, but for the future of humanity. When the day of the meeting arrived, he stood before his team, as he had countless times before, but today felt different. Today, he wasn't just the tech genius with a bold vision. He was a man with a new sense of clarity, of purpose. He cleared his throat, feeling the weight of what he was about to say. I've spent most of my career thinking about how we can push the boundaries of what's possible, he began. We've built rockets that can land themselves, we've revolutionized the electric car industry, and we've set our sights on Mars. But through it all, I've realized something. It's not enough to build great technology. We have to build it with a greater purpose in mind. The room was quiet, all eyes on him as he continued. We can create the most advanced technologies, but if we don't use them to serve people, to better their lives, then what's the point? I've learned that true leadership isn't just about being the best or winning the race. It's about lifting others up, serving them, and using the gifts we have to make the world a better place. That's what I want for this company. I want us to be a force for good, to lead with love, compassion, and integrity. Because at the end of the day, it's not the rockets or the cars that will matter. It's the lives we touch, the people we help, and the legacy we leave behind. There was a pause as Elon let his words sink in. And then, slowly, one by one, the faces in the room began to soften. There was a sense of understanding, of recognition. It wasn't just about profits anymore. It was about something more, something lasting, something meaningful. Elon's team had always respected him for his vision and drive, but now they saw him in a new light. They saw the man who had not only achieved greatness, but who had found something more valuable, purpose. And in that moment, they felt inspired. They felt a renewed sense of passion for their work, knowing that it wasn't just about the technology they were creating, but about the impact it could have on the world. Elon left the meeting that day with a sense of peace. He knew this was just the beginning. The path ahead would still be challenging, but he was no longer alone. He had embraced something greater than himself, and he was ready to lead with love, to create a legacy not just of innovation, but of service. Weeks passed, and the impact of Elon's decision to integrate his faith into his work began to ripple throughout his companies. The culture at SpaceX and Tesla began to shift. There was a sense of unity and purpose that had never existed before. Elon's leadership was no longer just about driving results and hitting goals. It was about inspiring people to be their best selves, to contribute to something larger than themselves. At SpaceX, the engineers and technicians felt a renewed sense of pride in their work. They weren't just building rockets for the sake of technology. They were building rockets to take humanity to the stars, to ensure that the human race would survive beyond the Earth. But more than that, they were part of something that had a deeper meaning. Elon's focus on faith and purpose helped them see their work as part of a larger, divine plan. Tesla, too, saw the effects of this transformation. Employees were no longer working simply for financial gain or the thrill of innovation. They were working to create sustainable solutions that would protect the planet and future generations. Elon had always been passionate about renewable energy, but now his mission had taken on a spiritual dimension. It wasn't just about reducing carbon emissions. It was about caring for God's creation, for the world he had entrusted to humanity. Yet, despite the positive changes, Elon knew that there would be challenges ahead. The business world was still driven by competition, profits, and success. There were still moments when he felt the pull to return to his old ways, the days when he was driven purely by ambition and the desire to conquer the next frontier. He had spent decades building a reputation as a visionary, and there were always pressures to continue pushing boundaries at any cost. One evening, after another grueling series of meetings, Elon found himself alone in his office once again. The city lights outside twinkled like 1,000 stars, and for a moment, he felt a sense of calm wash over him. But then, the familiar anxiety crept in. Was he doing enough? Was he truly leading the way that God wanted him to? Was his faith making a real difference in his life? Or was it just a nice idea he clung to when things were tough? He pulled out his Bible once more, as he had done countless times in recent weeks. This time, he opened it to the book of Proverbs, where wisdom and guidance awaited him. As he read, he felt a deep sense of conviction. He read the words, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight." Proverbs 3 verses 5 to 6. For the first time, Elon truly understood the meaning of those words. He had spent his life relying on his own intellect, his own abilities, and his own vision to shape the world. But now, he realized that he needed to surrender. Surrender not just his work, but his heart. He couldn't continue to push forward solely based on his own understanding of the world. He had to trust God with his future and let him guide his steps. Elon closed his Bible and sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the decision settling in. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't something he could do on his own. But he knew that this was the next step in his journey. He needed to rely on faith, not just in moments of uncertainty, but in every moment. It was time to fully trust in God's plan for his life, even if he didn't always understand it. The following day, as he sat in his office surrounded by his team, Elon felt a sense of peace that he hadn't experienced before. He no longer had the overwhelming sense of urgency to prove himself. He no longer felt that drive to be the smartest, the most successful, or the most innovative person in the room. He had already won in the most important way, by choosing to live a life of purpose, of faith, and of love. With a deep breath, Elon stood up, looked around at his team, and spoke from the heart. "I've realized something," he began. "For so long, I've been focused on building companies, achieving goals, and reaching for the stars. But what really matters, the only thing that really matters, is how we live our lives, how we love others, and how we use the gifts we've been given to serve the greater good. None of this, none of our work, would be possible without the people who support us, the love we share, and the grace that God gives us." He paused, searching their faces. "I don't have all the answers, but I know that moving forward, I want to lead not just with my mind, but with my heart. I want to be the kind of leader who puts people first, who leads with compassion, and who serves others in a way that reflects the love and grace of Jesus Christ." His words hung in the air, and for the first time, Elon felt a true connection with his team. They weren't just following him because of his brilliance or his track record. They were following him because they saw a man who was trying to live out the highest calling, to love and serve others. There was no greater inspiration than that. As the meeting came to an end, Elon felt a sense of peace. He knew that the road ahead would still be filled with challenges, but for the first time, he felt ready. Ready to trust, ready to serve, and ready to lead in a way that would make a real difference in the world. As the months passed, Elon found that leading with love and faith wasn't always easy. The business world was still relentless, and no matter how hard he tried to shift the focus of his companies toward purpose, there were always pressures to meet expectations, to deliver results, and to stay ahead of the competition. One evening, as Elon was preparing for a crucial board meeting with some of the top executives at Tesla and SpaceX, he found himself staring at his reflection in the mirror, questioning everything. The tension in his chest was almost unbearable. His mind raced as he thought about the challenges ahead. Tesla's stock price had recently taken a dip, SpaceX was facing unforeseen technical setbacks, and the world was becoming more and more uncertain. How could he lead with faith in the midst of such overwhelming challenges? He remembered the verse from the book of Isaiah, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." Isaiah 41 verse 10. The words echoed in his mind, but the doubts lingered. Would God truly help him navigate this storm? Could he really rely on his faith when everything felt so fragile? Taking a deep breath, Elon grabbed his Bible from his desk and opened it to a familiar passage, Philippians 4 verses 6 to 7. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. It was as though the words jumped off the page and into his soul. He had been trying to solve everything on his own, trying to control the outcomes with his intellect and resources. But the peace of God, the kind that transcended all understanding, was what he needed most. It wasn't about having all the answers. It was about trusting that, no matter what, God would be with him, guiding him through the toughest moments. Elon knelt in his office and prayed. He asked for wisdom, for peace, and for strength. He prayed for the ability to trust God in the midst of his anxieties and fears, knowing that whatever happened, he was not alone. The next day, at the board meeting, Elon felt a new sense of calm. He wasn't there to impress anyone or to prove himself. He was there to share his vision, his heart, and his belief that their work at Tesla and SpaceX was more than just about technology or profits. It was about changing the world for the better, creating a future where humanity could thrive. The executives listened, some skeptical, some intrigued. But what mattered most was that Elon spoke with a clarity and conviction he had never had before. He no longer felt the need to defend his faith or justify his decisions. He knew that this was the right path, and no matter the outcome, it was the path God had called him to walk. At the end of the meeting, the room was silent. It wasn't the typical response to one of Elon's presentations. There was no applause, no immediate excitement, but there was something deeper, respect. They respected the authenticity in his words, the quiet strength that came from his newfound faith. They saw a different Elon, a man who had found peace and purpose in the midst of chaos. In the following weeks, as challenges continued to arise, Elon found himself relying more and more on his faith. There were still moments of doubt, moments when the weight of the world seemed unbearable, but each time, he turned to God for guidance. And each time, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. Peace that didn't come from having all the answers, but from knowing that he wasn't alone. As Tesla began to recover, as SpaceX's latest project took flight, Elon knew that his faith had become the cornerstone of his leadership. It wasn't just about managing the companies or achieving success. It was about being the kind of leader who inspired others to believe in something greater, to work for something greater. His journey was far from over, and there would be more tests of faith ahead. But Elon Musk had learned one thing for sure. When he led with love, when he trusted in God's plan, he was able to navigate the challenges of life and business with a peace that transcended all understanding. And that was the greatest success of all. Elon Musk stood at the edge of the launch pad, his gaze fixed on the towering rocket that loomed before him. It was the culmination of years of work, of setbacks, triumphs, and near failures. The excitement of the team around him was palpable, but Elon felt a different kind of energy, one that came from a deep sense of peace, as though he were on the precipice of something much larger than this mission, something that stretched beyond the stars. The world had been watching for years as Elon pushed boundaries, made bold promises, and revolutionized entire industries. But now, there was something that set him apart. It wasn't just the tech, the rockets, or the electric cars. It was the man behind the innovations, the man who had learned to lead not with sheer intellect or ambition, but with heart, compassion, and faith. Over the past few months, everything in his life had come full circle. His companies were flourishing, but it was the people, the engineers, the designers, the workers, who truly stood at the center of his mission. They weren't just building machines. They were working to make the world a better place. They were working to fulfill a higher purpose. And Elon, who had once been consumed by the relentless pursuit of success, now found himself leading with a new sense of responsibility. It wasn't about being the richest man in the world, the most influential tech mogul, or even the first to send people to Mars. It was about something deeper, something more meaningful, leaving behind a legacy of faith, love, and service to others. The past few years had been transformative for him. He had embraced the teachings of Jesus, not as a distant concept, but as a daily guide in every decision, in every conversation, and in every action. Through the ups and downs, he had learned to trust in God's plan, even when things seemed uncertain. He had learned that real success wasn't just measured by the size of the company or the profits made. It was measured by the impact on people's lives, by the relationships built, and by the love shared. As the countdown for the launch began, Elon felt the familiar excitement of a new mission, but this time, he was grounded in something more than just technological achievement. He was grounded in faith, faith that, no matter the outcome, he was walking the path God had laid before him. The rocket lifted off into the sky, breaking through the atmosphere and into the unknown. For a brief moment, Elon stood still, watching as the vehicle disappeared into the vast expanse of space. It was a powerful moment, a symbol of humanity's potential, and yet, it reminded him of something even more profound. This wasn't just about reaching for the stars. It was about something more, something eternal. He turned to his team, who were watching with pride and awe as the rocket sailed through the sky. His heart swelled with gratitude for each person who had been part of this journey. They had all contributed to something that was bigger than themselves. Later that night, as Elon reflected on the day, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The success of the launch, the accolades, and the applause didn't matter as much as the quiet assurance that he was walking in alignment with his true purpose. His companies were succeeding, yes, but what truly mattered was how they were succeeding. They weren't just building rockets or electric cars. They were changing the world, together. And Elon knew that his legacy would be defined not by the technology he created, but by the lives he touched, by the way he had led with love, compassion, and humility, by the way he had chosen to embrace Jesus, not just in moments of crisis, but in every aspect of his life. As the years passed, Elon continued to innovate, to explore new frontiers, and to push the limits of what was possible. But he did so with a renewed sense of purpose. His faith was the foundation of every decision, the compass that guided his leadership, and the light that illuminated his path. And while his achievements would undoubtedly be remembered for generations to come, it was the quiet moments, the moments of reflection, prayer, and service, that truly defined his life's work. Elon Musk had reached for the stars, but in the process, he had discovered something far more valuable, a deeper connection with God, with others, and with his own heart. And that, he knew, was the true measure of success.